You've heard of the whirlwind, haven't you? Well, this is a whirlwind meeting that we planned on a very pleasant street in Plattsburgh, New York, with two Degrandpres, Dr. A.B., whom we've talked to before and generated almost more comment than any other show we've ever done, and Arthur. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Gordy. I'm just fine, thanks.
We learned today that we're tracking right along about the same age. Although I had to get prepped for the Santa Claus bit this year and you didn't, and that's the only difference between us.
Well, I'm going to work on that. Maybe I can catch up with you by next Christmas season.
Thank you so much for inviting us into your house today.
It's a pleasure to have you aboard here.
We've followed your life and many careers here in the North Country for a long, long time. Are you finally retired for good, or?
Well, I'm going to try a sabbatical for about 10 years. If I'm not happy, then I'll go back to work.
I walked in the door about 15 minutes ago, and we're recording this on December 14th, 2001, and the first thing I was greeted with was several impromptu commercials for businesses that are long since defunct in downtown Plattsburgh.
Well, Gordy, that's one of my hobbies. Would you like me to do one for you?
Well, of course.
Let's do the old Ginsberg furniture store commercial. This is Ginsberg's Furniture Store, 55 to 57 Margaret Street in beautiful downtown Plattsburgh.
Wait a minute, four full
Four
floors?
full floors of fine furniture.
Oh, Sid Spiegel would be proud of you, you know that? I love it. Well, you got a pleasant place here, and actually you're only a stone's throw, and it wouldn't take a very good arm to hit the back of your dad's house at 107 Court Street, would it?
Not at all, Gordy, and I can still hop right over that fence.
Oh, you're
But not with 100 pounds of grain on my back.
Oh, boy. Don't ask me to do any fence hopping today. I have enough trouble with the Santa Claus suit, you know. Doctor, how are you doing, sir?
I'm just fine this morning, thank you.
You're just as chipper and spry as you can possibly be. For how many years now? Didn't you have your 90-what birthday? Third?
Well, I'm working on my 93rd birthday now. From an insurance standpoint, I'm 93.
I love it. I don't know. I walked in here this morning. This guy puts us all to shame. He was a physician in this area for
6 years.
And the program we did together was so much fun the last time. Actually, it was to commemorate the 75th anniversary of Physicians Hospital.
That's correct, Gordy. That's absolutely correct. 75th anniversary. I was invited to be there, but was in Florida enjoying the warm Florida sunshine and was unable to attend. But I understand it was a tremendous success.
It was absolutely terrific, and A.B. Degrandpre called me on the telephone, which would have been less than 24 hours from now, and said, "Listen, my diary is being published." And I said, "Your diary is being published? How many people start a writing career in their 90s? I mean,
Not too many people I know.
this guy's truly amazing. We talked to him not too many months ago to talk about his first book, and now this diary is published. Why a diary? Where did this come from?
Well, this came from my 27 months overseas. It begins with our transatlantic crossing from Staten Island to Casablanca, North Africa, and it carries my overseas career for the 27 months until I reported back home at Camp Dix and then finally back to Plattsburgh.
So how long did it take to put this together in book form?
Oh, took hundreds of hours. My youngest daughter, Joanne, is largely responsible for this. She did all the typing, and then the Northeast Publishing put it together. And it's word for word, the various phrases and sentences that I put down during the war, some under great stress, others during phases of relaxation where the food was good and I ate so much of some of that fine food that I ended up with a kidney stone.
That's in there too, huh?
That's all in the book, yes. I think you'll enjoy it.
Oh, you know I'm going to enjoy it. I think you ought to sneak a copy of this to Tom Brokaw, don't you?
I think Tom would enjoy that book.
I know he would enjoy it.
I know Dad sent him his other book.
Yeah. You got to get a copy to Tom Brokaw.
All right, I shall do that at your suggestion.
Well, you know, Tom Brokaw just has done so much in the last few years to commemorate what the Second World War was all about for a couple of generations who just really don't know firsthand, right?
I can attest to that, being in education all my life. The kids know very little about the Second World War, and for that matter, about the Korean War.
Yeah, we've talked about that too because we just did a fairly recent show about the Korean War, the so-called Forgotten War. So it's time for us to do education, and we've spent a lot of time on our little corner and elsewhere promoting this kind of history. Because even though we like to think the 3 or 4 of us here are going to live forever, at some point in time we're going to rely on books and memories and video shows. And that's why we do our show, that's why he puts this diary down, and that's why his wonderful family supports him in this. Isn't it great? Talk about a legacy.
Dad's an amazing man. Anybody who can have a family of 8 and have it go so that 4 are born before World War II and 4 after, 4 boys, 4 girls, he's the essence of family planning.
I love it. I want you to see, I want our viewers to actually see the original diary.
That's exactly
It's
what it
the
is.
cover's getting a little limp in its old age, but it's been around for a long, long time. These are the exact words, and you've saved that along with a lot of other memorabilia, haven't you?
That's for sure, Gordy, yes. Some of these pages are yellow with age now, and some of the names are unintelligible, but for the most part, it's verbatim over a 27-month period while I was overseas in this little evacuation hospital where we moved around through North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany.
Well, it's a tremendous, it's a wonderful story. And if you don't mind me taking just a moment to pay a brief tribute to our friend John Bacon, who recently died. We've interviewed John in his home many times. He was a paratrooper, as you know, and so proud to wear that uniform, to walk and march in parades and so on. And we miss him a great deal, but it's good to remember his life and to remember your life because you're great patriots.
This is very interesting, you bringing up the name of John Bacon. I did not know John Bacon personally. He indicated that he knew me and knew one of my daughters. And within the last 10 days, I received a letter from England from a parachutist in the 101st Airborne Division who was one of John Bacon's closest friends and wanted to announce to me that John Bacon had passed away, wondered whether I had attended his funeral, and just simply indicated how close they were and how they'd kept in touch for so many years with each other. So through the courtesy of art, we found the article that was in the paper, which was a fine tribute to John Bacon, and I forwarded it already to him.
Isn't that terrific? The connections are made sometimes whether we know it or not, aren't they? Huh?
Well, that's for sure, Gordy.
That's really great. Okay. You are in for a treat. Don't you dare to go out and get a cold beer or a cup of coffee for a little while because here's what we're going to do. Sometimes we tell people what we're going to do and then we don't really do exactly what we said we were going to do because Calvin and I love to fly by the seat of our pants, and this program just develops with a life of its own. But what we plan to do today is to show you a large number of slides, mostly that were taken during the Second World War. Some were pictures that you took.
That's correct. Mostly were taken by my dental friend, Louis Immerman, with a nice Leica camera that he had, and some were sent to me following the war, courtesy of George Caffrey, who was a classmate of mine from St. John's High School, who became a legislative assistant for various congressmen, and sent me many slides after the war, most of which you will see presently. Before I get off John Bacon, I'd like to say one more thing, namely that about a year ago, he wrote me criticizing a word that I used in an article that I wrote about the invasion of Salerno in southwest Italy. He said that I should have used the word Dieppe instead of Dunkirk. Now, Dieppe, if anybody remembers, was a disastrous initial attempt, mainly by Canadians, to attack a small town in western France, mainly parachutists. They were hung up on church steeples and telephone wires, and it was really a slaughter of the Canadians. But I had to write Mr. Sedgwick back in England, indicating that the English lieutenant who guided our ship at Salerno did not use the word Dieppe. He said, "This is a bloody, bloody Dunkirk. Get out of the boat."
Oh, boy, oh, boy. We're trying to resolve all these issues from many years ago, and we're going to relive some of those days. How many times have you seen this collection of slides, Mr. Arthur?
Well, we've labored assiduously on many occasions to put the slides in order. I think that's absolutely critical. We've spent maybe 3 hours just the afternoon finalizing this project.
After you knew that we were going to be here at 8:30 this morning. Oh, boy. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to remember. It always is. Sometimes you look at those slides 200 times and see one more thing in there and say, oh, wow, look at this. I didn't realize that.
No
that
question
was in
back
there.
that.
So you're going to have some fun, folks. Stay with us as we continue interviewing Dr. A.B. Degrandpre on our little corner. Just imagine now that you've walked up and paid 15 cents for a ticket. You have your small bag of 22-cent popcorn. You're sitting very near the front row. There is a piano player down front, maybe somebody playing the drums, and one old guy with a violin. And now the Nickelodeon is about to begin. Oh, boy. This is quite a job to put these together.
You notice no offensive pictures are being shown.
No offensive pictures are ever shown here. This is absolutely wonderful. Just talk and tell us what you see.
This is en route to Casablanca on the Mariposa. I was on anti-aircraft duty. All I knew was which end of the gun to shoot out of. I had never had any experience shooting down Germans at this point. That's an early meeting in Casablanca, North Africa. On the left is Colonel Howard Patterson, who post-war became president of the American College of Surgeons. Next is the chief of medicine, William Comas, who died shortly after the war. Next is Charles Musso, a very bright young surgeon from Washington, D.C., who committed suicide in our room Christmas Eve. Next is Captain Immerman, a dentist, our local dentist, and my buddy. And the last is myself. And I pointed out before that we dug foxholes of equal size and length so that I got the better of that deal.
Of course you did. You haven't changed a bit.
Now, and the way extreme friend is a Major Halliday who became ill, we thought on Atabrine, which we all had to take, and was sent back to the States. Front row, again, would be Immerman, Musso bearing his pectoral muscles. Next, Major Fouché, our chest surgeon. At the extreme right is Major Comas, and back of him, Lieutenant Bauer. To his left, Major Matthews. I'm in the center, along with some of our finest special troops. This is an interesting picture. Halliday is on the left. Some of the Afro-Americans are in the background. I am there. Lieutenant Matthews, Fouché, Bauer, Comas. And in the front is a very interesting man. His name is Colonel Thaxton, Charles Thaxton, head of urology in Orangeburg, South Carolina. He was our chief of surgery, hated our commanding officer, Colonel Paul Sauer, threatened mutiny, and tried to enlist some of us to throw him overboard on the invasion of Salerno. Nobody volunteered, so the colonel remained in charge, and this fellow eventually was sent back to the States, thinking that he had a overactive thyroid. He was operated on in the Cleveland Clinic. It made no improvement in his conditions, and it was finally determined that all he had was malaria. Yeah. These are some of our beauties playing softball in North Africa. This is the type of transportation we had. This is called 40 and 8. World War II transportation, and this was a train we used going from Casablanca to Ujda, which was our second station. This interesting picture taken at Ujda. As you notice, on the top would be the Moroccan flag, French flag, and our flag. Inside that little area is the Sultan of Morocco, waiting to see an exhibit of American air power. Because at this stage of the war, he was uncertain as to whether to side with the Germans, who were still fighting vigorously in North Africa, or whether to be on our side. So we showed him some air power, including the flying of several P-38s about 20 feet over his head. And the following day, he decided to stick with us.
Love it.
Ujda again. On the left, Mark Clark, who was commanding officer of the Fifth Army. Colonel Baxter immediately to his right, our chief of medicine. President Eisenhower in the middle. Colonel Sauer at the right, our commanding officer. And in back, two of Eisenhower's aides. We almost enjoyed Eisenhower's visit because, as you notice, he was perspiring in that picture. And it was probably 120 degrees. So he had engineers come and put water in towers in the vicinity of the operating room so that the water ran constantly and brought the temperature down to livable conditions. A couple of our finest troops. Taken at Mirz el-Kabir prior to Salerno. We're sitting there relaxing. My friend Immerman is smoking a cigarette. A colonel, Captain Gove from Peru, New York, came to visit me, because I supposedly knew him. I knew his name, and at the moment I couldn't think of the name of any of my roommates. That's actually the invasion of Salerno. I have no idea who took that picture, but it's on the boat itself. And as you can see, way at the back, bare to the waist, is the little English lieutenant who directed the boat and let us off in about 5 feet of water. I'm in the center. Immerman is to my left. To the left of him is a fellow by the name of Friedman, who must be my age, who is still actively practicing. Immediately behind Immerman and myself is Colonel Patterson, a famous doctor from Roosevelt Hospital in New York, who later became president of the College of Surgeons. That's actually the little boat we invaded on. That's called an LCA. The front of that boat lets down. The director of the boat is in the rear, and he's the fellow that said, "Get the hell out, this is another bloody Dunkirk." Let us out in about 5 feet of water.
And I learned that at the D-Day Museum in New Orleans last January, about a year ago, that those boats were developed right there in a lake just north of New Orleans.
I never knew that. That's Immerman and myself in the foxhole where we spent at least 2 days following the invasion of Salerno. In the hurry to get off the LCA, he had forgotten his musette bag, and I had grabbed his by mistake, so that I shared his sea rations for the first 2 days. Landing at Salerno. Our equipment was on 9 different boats, so it took us at least 2 days to get it together, and have it function. That's a silly picture taken in a hospital, the 24th of a March hospital built by Mussolini. Immerman, the fellow in front with the broad smile, we're all smiling there, of course, had set a time limit on his photograph, 30 seconds. And he ran back to get in the picture, and we kept trying to push him out of the picture. So that's the reason for the seeming hilarity. That's the two little Italian beggar girls. I think they're called scunicis. I looked up the spelling, but I couldn't quite find it. But that shows you some of the poverty in England. That's, again, the 4 of the bridge players. We played a lot of bridge. That picture is while we were stationed in Naples, and we were visiting Sorrento, which is a beautiful resort area in southeastern Italy. And this is on our way to the Amalfi Drive, which is a beautiful area in eastern Italy. That was our day of our visit to Capri. Emmerman's in front, Musso's there, Colonel Patterson's at the top left. I'm next to him. Two of our nurses. I mistakenly sent this picture home, and my dear wife didn't think that we were doing so badly.
So Dad told my mother that these were the girls I went to the junior prom with, but that was not probably because I was only 4 years old.
I didn't wash it all, right? Oh, great.
A picture of us playing cards prior to the invasion at Anzio. We were in Naples Harbor for 8 or 9 days, amassing this armada of boats and equipment. Getting towards Anzio, somebody took this picture of Emmerman and myself playing cards. I remember jumping off the boat, swimming in Naples Harbor, and refreshing ourselves. We had little or no food for those 9 days, and it was rather. This is an interesting picture. This is the exact landing site at Anzio. The exact landing site. This road is mined on both sides, and we had to. It's an LST that we came in on, that boat in the rear. And to me, that's an interesting picture because it brought back many memories.
Oh, I bet.
No. Another invasion picture, nothing of any consequence. As you can see, the glass is cracked. Again, Anzio, that building on the right was called the factory. It took us days to capture that one building because it filled it with German snipers. Again, a picture at Anzio, attacking the factory. Anzio again. Mass destruction. Another picture of Anzio. Another. Anzio. It could have been our officers' club. I'm not sure. We set up, put a big sign up saying this building is reserved for the exclusive use of the 95th Evacuation Hospital for Officers Club. The next day, the whole block of buildings
was gone.
Raised. Yeah. That's Anzio. Now that's Anzio walking around with red crosses on, which of course the Germans didn't respect very much. And on the right is Friedman, Friedenberg, a good friend who was still active at the University of Pennsylvania, and believe it or not, attended our most recent meeting of the 95th Evacuation Hospital, which was held someplace in Kentucky. And he's just writing a book about Anzio at the present time. Again, Anzio. That's a long Tom. Several of these were put in the perimeter around our hospital because the Germans were attacking our hospital. We went underground at Anzio. We had to stay underground. Mail call at Anzio. Not a very good picture, is it? But that's where I was when the German came over and dropped 7 bombs on our hospital and killed, I don't know him. This is, to me, is a fascinating picture. It looks like a wheat field, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that's anti-aircraft fire.
You gotta be kidding.
The heaviest concentration of anti-aircraft fire in the world.
I've never seen a photograph like that. That's
just
amazing.
A plane going up through that stuff, Again, a picture of Signal Corps people working on wires.
Oh, what a picture. What a picture.
I'm not sure. Maybe P-51s, I wouldn't swear. We were using P-47s, P-38s, P-51s. Again, showing the ruin that took place. That's myself and Musso there at my left. Operating.
First class conditions, huh?
Tremendous sterility.
Oh, my.
LST. Getting off a larger boat. No, that's an amphibious duck.
Yes.
That was an LST. The boat behind was an. This is going through one of the tunnels. This is not a tunnel in Afghanistan. This is a tunnel in Italy. That's going through the tunnel.
Okay, so that tunnel, what was that like?
That, I believe, is a tunnel between Oran and Mirs el-Kabir, where we spent several weeks getting ready for the invasion of Salerno. It was just clearing out the debris and the smoke and the dirt that was in that tunnel.
But you still had to go in there.
Had to go through there. Now, I didn't go. These were troops and
Sure.
regular troops and tanks that went in ahead.
Dad, is that fire made by a phosphorus bomb?
No, not these. We'll show you some later on. Okay. The effect of phosphorus. That's the Anzio again, looking at it, sniping. A couple of snipers that were trying to shoot the Germans.
You know, you can. I don't know how our viewers take this, but as I look at these pictures, I see motion. I can feel emotion and see motion in these pictures. You'll notice that on public television, when some of the recreations have been done, some of the specials have been done about the Civil War, the clever use of still photographs actually give the impression of motion. And I've been blessed with a tremendous imagination, and thanks to your commentary, I can almost feel what's going on, and I hope the rest of our viewers are doing the same, because these pictures are packed with emotion, aren't they, Art?
They absolutely are. And I think our benefit of having a few years on us is the fact that we grew up with radio, and we developed tremendous imaginations.
You know, I make presentations to school children and to college students, and I focus my talks on that word, imagination, and how it stands by us our whole lifetimes. If we can imagine what we'd like our lives and our careers to be, if we can use our imagination by reading books and listening to the radio, because when we were youngsters, Art and I, we had to devise our own Lone Ranger and our own Shadow and our own Bulldog Drummond and our own Fibber McGee and Molly. And they were very special to us because we created images in our own mind. And never taking a thing away from the wonderful medium of television, but when those programs all were transferred to television, it took away one more dimension of that imagination, didn't it?
That's for sure. I can remember as a young fella playing perhaps a game of kick the can, and what I would do is go in the house and listen to 3 or 4 of my shows on the radio while everybody was looking for me.
You were devious even back then, weren't you, young man? Okay, we're learning more stuff about you than we ever dreamed. All right, what's this?
Oh, that's my serious war wound. I was playing softball and sprained my ankle.
Oh, this got you the sympathy vote.
That was not worth a Purple Heart.
Now that's Grantley Taylor. He, at Anzio, became our chief of surgery, replacing Howard Patterson, who was sent to another evacuation hospital away from the front. And during a very heavy raid at Anzio, this man is above ground walking as he is there. In that particular case, there's one other fellow above ground. But usually everybody got into foxholes at a time like this. And I said to Grantley, Grantley, you're the only man above ground. We're all hiding. He said, I thought this was your normal environment. That's a wonderful man. That's a Episcopal minister, Chaplain Davis. Just a wonderful man. We talked religion a lot. At one place, at one time in Anzio, we were both in the latrine together, and honestly, we were both blown off the latrine by a bomb that landed right next to us.
That's a vivid memory, huh?
Never forget him.
Wow.
That's just a insert, nothing special.
What would that be in the background? A water tower?
Water tower of some kind, yeah.
I noticed the different style tents than I've ever seen before, and the last tent's had a tip on the top. I don't know what that was all about, for ventilation or...
I don't know.
Who would know?
No, we rolled them up from the bottom, of course, for ventilation.
Yeah.
That's Sure, Dr. Staples. He was a major, great friend of mine. After the war, went to Dartmouth and became head of orthopedics at the Mary Hitchcock Hospital in Dartmouth, where he spent the rest of his life. Still alive, I believe, but very poor physical condition.
Those would be, would those be electric towers in the background, do you think?
I don't know. I can't tell you.
Hard to tell. They almost look like electric towers.
That's an interesting picture to me, because it was months, of course, before we could take Casino. And Casino is where the 6th century Benedictine monastery was located, which we totally destroyed one bright spring morning. I remember being set up, our hospital, this is following our being bombed at Anzio. We were brought back to this area, and we saw at least 700 or 800 of our planes drop all their bombs on the Benedictine monastery, making rubble out of it. And then a little later on, we took a ride and tried to get into Casino, but this is about as far as we could go.
You've been warned.
Been warned, yeah. And finally, it's my understanding that only the Polish contingents hit the mountain itself. That British and the Hawaiians and the Americans, Australians tried to take the top of the mountain, but were unsuccessful. Now that's an interesting picture. That's the exact boat where we made the landing at southern France. We were again let off in about 5 feet of water. We left from Naples to southern France. The convoy got together at Corsica, in a port called Ajaccio, and we must have had 500 or 600 boats there, maybe more.
Notice the numbers backwards on that.
Yes.
So the slide must be in.
Art Junior must have put that one in. Something just piqued my interest, something I hadn't thought of when Dr. Degrandpre said the Americans, the British, and the Hawaiians were there. So apparently Hawaiians were separate. They were not part of Americans' forces.
They fought with us. I think it was the 41st Infantry Regiment. They were extremely brave. And lots of became wounded. And of course, they were criticized so much during the early phase of the war and were interned many times improperly by our government.
It's an interesting piece of history which many people may not be aware of.
Brave fighters. Yeah.
Consider them, they're one of 50 states now, but then they were.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. It's a landing again. Yeah. See how they're landing in water?
Is that U.S. or 2U? Are we going to ask Arthur?
That should be U.S.
We knew that. We're just adding a little levity here. Oh, boy.
Another landing in water. This is where Emmerman was so short I had to hold him above water.
You told us that
Yeah.
story,
Yeah,
yeah.
I told you that the last time.
Sometimes it does have advantages to be tall, doesn't it?
Well, he rewarded me by digging half the foxhole.
Should have.
That's Rome, catacombs. Amazing sight to visit, going down these tunnels and
Still is today.
seeing the
sure.
bones of hundreds and thousands of martyrs, people who died down there for their faith.
And the famous Jeep, huh?
That's the picture of our hospital from the air. That's taken in a place called Capua, which is north of Rome. Mud hole, another invasion site or scene. Another along the same lines, nothing special. Another.
Oh, boy. But look at these. We've seen these pictures occasionally on television. We've seen these things at various museums. But
The boats all lined up.
to see them all lined up and to realize what was going through those young guys, some of those guys 18, 19 years old, some even younger.
Was there a group that went in ahead of time, Dad, to check out all the mines? It must have been heavily mined.
There were. Paratroopers went in ahead very often. Yeah, this John Bacon and this man Sedgwick from England that I spoke about, they dropped like at Normandy several hours before the troops came in to secure, mainly to secure bridges. Nothing special about that.
Well, this looks like that Jeep is kind of bogged way down.
Seen better days.
Oh, man, looks like they're all trying to get that thing out of there.
That's what they're trying to do. That's an interesting picture. It's a little bit out of place. That's Sally Hockett. And she was coming from Algiers to join us, along with our other nurses, at Salerno. And the boat she was on, which was a hospital ship, well marked, was attacked by the Germans. And she became one of the casualties.
Now, with that, it looks like she might have lost a hand. I'm not sure.
I think it was just I don't think she lost a hand, because I have a later picture of her nursing one of our enlisted men.
Ah.
That's a Red Cross nurse. Actually, not a nurse, a Red Cross worker. That's a Lister bag. She's drawing chlorine smelling water out of that Lister bag.
Isn't that in it?
Chlorinated, of course.
Now, is that bag, would that be canvas or
That's
rubber?
that's a canvas bag. It's filled.
Suspended from a tripod.
That's right, filled with chlorine. Yeah, chlorine water.
She looks like she's putting it into a canteen.
She's exactly what she's doing. Now, I believe she was killed at Anzio.
Really?
I think so. That's phosphorus.
Oh, man, what a shot.
Yeah.
What a picture.
Yeah. We were en route one day, and we were being attacked with all this phosphorus. And the truck immediately behind the truck I was in was hit, and of course the people were killed. Yeah. It's a fiery death. It's another phosphorus attack. They attack convoys frequently.
Yep.
Yeah. You know who that is?
Well, Irving Berlin.
Yeah.
Now, let me see. Irving Berlin, how long did he live? 100 or 101?
About 100, yes.
Well, yeah, but you're gonna live to be at least 115. We already have a plan for you. Boy, what a great guy, though. From Alexander's Ragtime Band,
Right.
Such a prolific songwriter, performer. Where would that have been taken, Doc?
In France, somewhere in France.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
What a great shot. I love it.
Anybody know who that is?
Oh, Marlene Dietrich.
Marlene Dietrich.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're taxing me a little bit
Yeah.
here.
With one of our Red Cross workers on her left.
Yep.
He visited our camp. That, to me, of course, is of little interest to you and the public, but it's of great interest to me. I'm at the left. Dr. Baudry, a chemist and mayor of this small town, was next. Next is a Frenchman whom I can't identify. The woman is Madame Baudry. She was a very wealthy woman of Smith's chocolate background. Next to her on the right is Colonel Sauer, our commanding officer. The only reason I was there because I could speak a little French. Next to him on the right, with his head tilted, is Perrin Long, professor of surgery at Johns Hopkins University, really a famous doctor in medical circles. And next to him was Colonel Binkley, our executive officer, taking us Santa Moore.
I love it. Oh, isn't that great?
That is a pontoon bridge that we use to cross the Rhine River, leaving going to the Strasbourg area and going into Germany.
Some of the young people in our viewing audience may have heard of pontoon bridges but had no idea what they were, and that's a very graphic depiction that can show you how they were made.
Yes, exactly.
These temporary bridges were absolutely essential, and it's amazing how much weight they would hold.
Yes, most of the main bridges, of course, were destroyed either by us or blown up by the Germans, so we couldn't get across the Rhine River.
And if they had to, they could make one of those bridges in almost record time. couldn't they?
Exactly. Yeah. That's another just invasion site, and I believe that's the bridge at Worms on the upper left that had been blown. Yeah. That's Ike celebrating victory. And Beetle Smith's on his right. The others I don't recognize.
That's about the broadest smile you'll ever see on Eisenhower, right there. Huh?
Exactly, yeah. He was
You can understand why.
happy that day, I'm sure. Yeah. That's the half-mast in April of 1945 when Roosevelt died, and we had a little memorial service commemorating
Is
him.
there anybody who lived through that time period, and including your son and myself, who can't remember that day? It was quite a time period. Our perspective is different from yours, and my perspective is slightly different from Art's, because his dad was there, and my dad was home with me. He was a minister, but he was he worked wearing the black armband, and when there would be air raids, he would go around the community and have people pull their shades and shut their lights off, and so, you know, and I can remember later as a young person learning the different airplanes, working as a spotter. Did you do that, Art?
I can identify with those air raids. We had the 4 children at that time, and my mom quite often would call Giroux's restaurant and have a couple of big lobsters delivered. And we'd have candlelight and eat those lobsters with the shades all down.
Is it that? I don't remember us ever having any lobsters, but I do remember what a mysterious time it was during the air raids when you'd hear those wailing sirens, and you knew it was a very important and serious time.
Well, that's for sure. A very, very scary feeling.
Most people years ago used to pull the shades down when the food wasn't very palatable.
But I lived in Westchester County in those days, and German submarines were not too far away.
Well, that's quite an experience. Yeah. At times they were pretty close to the mainland.
And the radio, of course, as we've mentioned before, was absolutely vital. And you can remember reporters, some are still alive and some have only recently died, who cut their teeth on what happened during that time period. Robert Trout, Gabriel Heater,
Walter Winchell,
Mr. and Mrs. American, all the ships at sea.
Let's go to press.
Yeah. Let's go to press, huh? So many, just floods of memories, and it's fun to share this with all of you sitting around here. And Calvin, who's 10 years younger than we are,
Well, 2 of you. 10 years younger than Dr.
Yeah, at least.
That picture was taken at KIST, K-I-S-T, in Germany. That's where we were set up at that time. And that, again, is part of the ceremony. Our first sergeant's on the right, and I think he was responsible for stealing some of our food and selling it to the French.
That's an interesting legacy for him, right?
That's a wonderful picture. The woman with the white garment on her head is Teresa Newman. These are all enlisted men from our hospital, and I traveled with them 300 and some miles to visit her and got permission to see her. She was a Catholic mystic, and supposedly ate nothing, drank nothing, had no bodily functions, lived only on Holy Communion, which she attended every day. I saw the stigmata on her hands and feet, showed pictures of her bleeding vigorously, particularly on Good Friday.
Wow.
The bishop said that prior to the Second World War, thousands came to visit her, nurses, doctors of all faiths, and they've never saw her eat a bite of food. Her brother could speak a little English, said it was great to have her around because she never had to eat any food and never had to stop to go to the bathroom. Yeah.
Could you communicate with her at all?
Yes, a little. She spoke German, but certainly was not a hysterical woman.
Yeah.
Plump, woman of about 45 years of age. I still have a picture of her at home, comparable to this picture.
So it was an interesting experience for you.
And she told us, or rather her brother told us, that the Germans wanted her to retreat with them as they left this village. And she refused to, and they shelled the village, and the only 2 homes that were left unharmed was her house and the church next door.
Oh, boy. Isn't that a great story?
I would love to have gone back after the war and stayed right with her, just, because being a doctor, I'm a skeptic,
Yeah.
But I never had the chance. I got so busy after the war that I never went back.
Well, Dad, if you don't send me back to work again, I'd be glad to take you over there.
She's long since gone, and she was never beatified by the church.
Really?
I followed her career in the papers as much as I could, and she died about 10 years later.
Wow, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we only had 600 or 800 for that one, but that's great memories for you.
That's what sure is.
Glows, too.
Doesn't she sort of glow?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost a halo. That's wonderful. Oh, I love it. Where did these pictures come from for these slides?
These came from George Caffrey.
Oh, they did? I love it.
How are we doing for time, Clive?
We're doing great.
Are we?
We're doing
we
just...
still got, we got more.
Yeah, we're doing great. We got a
There's
few
some
more.
great shots of Pearl Harbor that I think the public would love to see.
Wait till you see the Pearl Harbor shots.
What we're doing today, we think, is very important. This is the kind of show that Calvin and I like to do best. We like to record personal histories, and especially when they're tied in with history of our country, because those of us who are around this table have different perspectives. Everyone watching this program has a different perspective, and these pictures that we're seeing evoke so many memories. Imagine, we're losing a lot of World War II veterans every single day.
1,000 a day, I think.
1,000 or more a day. And pretty soon, in 20 years or so, there won't be any left. So it's very important that we have these videos like we're doing today to show to future generations. For your grandchildren and for my grandchildren and their grandchildren. It's great. This is a wonderful piece of history, and I think it's obvious how much impressed I am by this information. And I don't mind telling you again that you just blow me away to be able to say who those pictures are in the photographs, because I can't remember the names of all the people I graduated from high school with. And that isn't nearly so many years ago. So I'm just so delighted that the good Lord gave you the strength and the stamina to be around with us today, to have accomplished so much in your lifetime, to have touched so many lives, and to share this with somebody else. Doesn't it make you feel good that you can
Sure
share
does.
it?
I don't know why I've been spared so long, because they say the good die young,
And here we are, right? All right, next.
Now that's beginning of Pearl Harbor.
Oh, my. What a picture.
What a picture. Yeah. Imagine the photographer that was that close. You'll see other pictures that were even more dramatic. I don't know whether that's a Japanese plane at the top coming in or not. That black
It's
spot.
hard to tell. There were a lot of things blowing around.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, there's another one. Wow. Talk about a classic photograph.
That picture reminds me of the Trade Center on September 11th.
In
It truly
miniature.
does. Yep,
It
in
does. Think
miniature.
about it. Many people have been spinning around the connection between those two events, the same kinds of horror, the same kinds of shock and surprise, and the same kinds of way of reacting in our country coming together. This is, we're proud, of course, to be Americans, but it's interesting for us, those of us who've lived through this whole time period from the 1930s through now the change of another century, to compare significant events.
Look at this one, Gordy.
Oh, my. Talk about the rocket's red glare.
Exactly. Yeah, the rocket's red glare.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Some of these photographs I've seen different views of before. How did you come by these
Again,
pictures?
through my courtesy of my friend George Caffrey with through the War Department.
These are images. Look, look at the boat in the foreground. These things happening in the background. And you can just imagine the radio messages that are going back and forth. And now that we've had the perspective of history to determine how this attack occurred and what might have been, of course, your vision is 20/20 in hindsight always, right?
Another one.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Look at this. What a terrible destruction. I've never been to Pearl Harbor, but I would love to go sometime to visit the Arizona and so on.
Look at the explosion in the distance there.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
There's a pretty close one, isn't there, huh?
I'll say,
Talk about that anti-aircraft gun. If you were to show that immediately, people wouldn't know what it was until they...
Amazing photography.
Oh, my.
Photography.
Oh, boy.
That's a Japanese aircraft carrier being sunk. We believe that picture was taken from a submarine using a periscope.
Well, but it looks like it's at least at water, almost at the level of the surface of the water, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Looks like that might be a periscope to the extreme left. Those horizontal lines that are parallel could be the
And the line
hairs.
down through the
Yeah,
center.
unless we directed a torpedo there, I'm not sure. That's got to be an American aircraft carrier that's sinking. Look at the lineup of the crew there on the higher side.
Wow.
Yeah. Another aerial view of an aircraft carrier.
Now, we don't know if, is that ship firing and sinking at the same time?
No, I think that's firing. I think that's an American ship firing salvos. Either a heavy cruiser or a battleship. Wounded airman being dragged out of his plane.
You know, doesn't it look like a picture that's almost like a picture that's been staged?
It does, doesn't it?
But look into this guy's face, and you know that
Suffering.
that this is real. That would be. You think that would be on an aircraft carrier?
Probably just landing on an aircraft carrier after a mission.
It was very difficult for him to get back, and some of the stories these people tell of how they would land with almost nothing left of a plane and actually live through it.
Exactly.
Amazing stories.
Yeah.
Wow, there's a classic photograph.
Yeah. That's, to me, of a great interest. That's in the far Pacific. A little, probably Japanese Siamese girl giving the anesthetic. The doctor on the upper left is a famous doctor whose name I don't recall. The doctor with the glasses and the mustache. But he's known in medical circles all over the world.
Mind you, the history of anesthesia is something we can discuss at another time,
Exactly.
but it's not necessarily administered that way today, is it?
No, indeed, no.
Boy, oh boy.
I believe that's a Japanese plane.
Zero?
Zero, yes. Yeah. I believe so.
It looks like it might be on fire as well.
I don't know. I wouldn't assume that.
Maybe
Hard to tell. I see smoke coming down through the bottom, and I'm not sure if that's existing. And look at the plume behind it, so it may have been hit.
It may have been one of these Japanese kamikazes.
Look at this.
It's an invasion again in the Pacific. These are Japanese prisoners of war.
You don't know where?
I have no idea where it was. Yeah.
Ed, you did have a chance to go to the Pacific, didn't you?
Our commander, Colonel Sauer, commanding officer, wanted us all to go to the Pacific, but gave us some time off after being overseas 27 months, and I had accumulated a massive number of points, having had 4 children. Our little hospital had won 8 battle stars, and so I was one of the early ones to be let out for a month. And I was sent to Paris, where I spent 3 or 4 days, then went to the Orly airfield, which is outside Paris, sent to the Azore Islands, and flew home on a C-47. Everybody on the plane was of higher rank than myself, so there were no seats. I sat on the floor of the plane all the way back.
Never mind. You were glad to be there, weren't you?
I'm glad to be there. I'm glad not to have my name called off, because the boat was the plane was overloaded, and there was a very heavy headwind, so they had to leave off some of these people who had been overseas so many months. And fortunately, they took the names from the Z back to the A's, and my name, starting with a D, I was relatively safe.
You were good.
So we stopped at Bermuda, and then we went to Wilmington, North Carolina, and then to Dix, and I was discharged from Dix. Discharged simply because the Japanese phase was over at that time.
Oh, look at this one.
Mainly British troops cheering something.
That's a happy group. Don't you wish you knew what the occasion was?
Could have been E Day, VE Day, or
VJ Day.
VJ Day.
VJ Day,
VJ
yeah.
Day, yeah. Now let's see who that is. We've got Halsey and Nimitz and MacArthur.
See MacArthur on the right?
Right,
Yeah.
MacArthur, and I believe that's Halsey next to him, and I think it's Nimitz signing, but I wouldn't swear to that. And the man right in the center has a familiar face, but again, I can't identify the name. Basically the same picture. That was on one of our battleships, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Missouri, was it? I can't
Probably.
remember. I think it was the Missouri. Same picture, same theme.
He's right-handed and he's left-handed.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
I thought we had one of the Japanese there, Art. We missed that? You know, the Japanese commander.
That didn't
Didn't
pop
turn
up
out,
this
didn't
time.
pop up,
Yeah.
all right. Now this is who? This is Truman. Is that Barclay with him?
Probably.
I think that's Alvin Barkley.
Yeah, that's at the Truman's inauguration, you know. Because he filled in for Roosevelt, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, there are the two of them again with their spouses. That's the parade down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Oh, that's a good shot. I love it.
Yeah. Same theme.
The
Another.
trolley tracks, too. Huh?
Yes, yeah, old trolley tracks.
That's cool
Yeah.
to see that there.
Like Margaret Street in Plattsburgh years ago. Same sequence.
Oh, this is great. Look at this.
More of the same.
Yeah, 3 tanks abreast.
More of the same.
Were you there?
No, I was there for Roosevelt's inauguration, standing in the rain on top of the Occidental Hotel, watching him go by in the pouring rain.
Really?
Yeah, and that'd be 1932. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Now that's got to be that can't be the South Pacific. That next one. That's got to be up in the Arctic somewhere with the Sisters of Mercy.
Is that a photograph of Calvin right there?
That could be. Doesn't see the old would that be 16 millimeter, 32 Calvin maybe?
I have no idea. It's not VHS, I don't know.
Now wait, is that a
There's
helicopter?
a helicopter in that photograph.
So that had to be fairly late, huh? Look at this.
Yeah, looks like the Plattsburgh ice storm, doesn't it?
Boy, oh boy, about quite a few years before that. That must have been a bad time. That's a tent, in case you didn't know
Admiral
it.
Byrd. Interesting picture.
That's a
He
great
explored both the
photograph.
North and the South Pole, I believe. And it's hard to tell from that picture. He looks though he's looking south, but you can't be sure. That's a sailor in a waterproof outfit.
Those hats are classic, aren't they? Look at this.
That's probably up in the Aleutian Islands, I would guess. Nothing special.
You wonder what they're looking up at. I don't know if it's a flag or an incoming. It's hard to tell.
Hard
huh?
to tell, it certainly is, yeah. But,
Look at this.
it's pretty well frozen in, isn't it? With all those ice cakes around.
My.
That's,
Oh, boy.
that's the frozen tundra, frozen
Just
north.
the place
isn't
you'd love to be, huh? Look at that.
it?
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, what a
yeah,
shot.
yeah,
With his head sticking out of the
yeah,
snow.
yeah.
Oh, my.
That's a familiar sight, isn't it?
And look at the car. So, you know, it was probably taken shortly after it opened in downtown Plattsburgh.
Probably, yeah.
There's quite a story which we've recounted on this program numerous times about how difficult it was to finally get that monument finished and open and paid for. Yeah.
There's an interesting picture. That's the old barracks, World War I.
Now, mind you, some of our viewers may not be aware of the Plattsburgh idea and the fact that ROTC was started as a concept right here on the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and a lot of famous people came here, and businessmen were trained, officers were trained right here, not only on the barracks, but up and down the Saranac River and so on, right straight up through the 1930s.
Supposed to have been a wealthy man's camp. But this, I believe, is years before.
Look at this. These are great shots. I've never seen these before.
Around the time of the First World War. That's the parade grounds.
Parade ground, the old base oval. Some of those buildings still exist. We've been to how many functions out there over the years?
Years ago, yes, many years ago. That's a fascinating picture. That was sent to me about 10 years ago. That's a German prisoner of war from the Second World War. He had been out in the wilds for about 6 days before he was rescued. He was wounded in the leg. And by the time they brought him in to our hospital, he had to have his leg amputated. This shows a picture of how he looked probably about 1990. He had just shot a deer, as you can see. And he wanted to know how I was. I honestly think he wanted to know more about the nurse that took care of him than he did about me. But anyway, we had great correspondence, first through an international organization, giving him permission to write me. And he wrote me a very nice letter, which had been translated because he spoke no English at all. But it was just saying, thank you for saving my life.
Isn't it nice to refresh those contacts in a different time, in a different place, and a different feeling, to go back and meet these people who were, in essence, our enemies, but you treated many of them, didn't you?
That's right, for sure.
And it's good to see, we've interviewed a number of people including John Bacon, who went back for these reunions and talked to Japanese pilots and talked to German soldiers and so on, separated by over 50 years. And
I think he had 7 or 8 Purple Hearts, didn't he?
Yeah, lots.
He was in both the European theater and the Pacific theater, and I believe Korea, and was wounded many, many times, and ended up working for Bill McBride.
Oh, look at this. You think I don't? I've got a couple of those, not quite as fancy as that, but the tin candle holders in my house, goodness knows when they were made, but you put a candle in it, and as it burns down, you push a little lever up, and it pushes the candle a little higher so it burns. That's real neat. Now, picture the piano player yawning just like that, putting the cover down on his piano and leaving for the night. We're going to wrap up this delicious program in just a few minutes. We were just kidding about being on board that ship there and having the numbers backward on the slides, and then that evoked a memory of you sleeping there.
Well, we slept on there for about 10 days. Left Naples, Bay of Naples, and waiting to land. We were in a very dimly illuminated room, perhaps 100 of us, sleeping in 4 levels of hammocks.
Oh, my.
I was on the top level. Can you imagine climbing up over 3 hammocks to get up there? The room was illuminated by one very weak light, so it was almost like sleeping in the dark. Starving. And the night before we landed, we stood in line and ate the leftovers from the Navy. They were having spaghetti and meatballs, and the ones they didn't eat themselves that they threw out, we eagerly devoured. Yeah.
Isn't, boy.
Yeah. And then landed the next morning. Colonel Saar, our commanding officer, couldn't wait to get the nurses landing. So he and I drove down to the seashore. He had a wooden box, and he put the wooden box just on the shore so that our nurses could land ahead of the nurses from the rival 93rd Evacuation Hospital.
Yeah. A little friendly competition there, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah. Well, there's a lot in this book. There are a lot of memories that you have that haven't been written anywhere. Hopefully, if we do Chapter 3 of the A.B. Degrandpre stories sometime, we'll evoke a few more of those memories, because each time something clicks again, doesn't it?
At times, yeah, at times.
So this was fun to do. It was
enjoyed doing it.
some of the events that are recounted in here weren't necessarily fun to go through,
Exactly.
but it is interesting to remember.
Yeah, there's a big segment, of course, on Anzio here. But it goes through the whole story, the people who visited us, our different locations, some of the dangerous situations we were in.
And
There's a lot of history
it's
in
a
there.
chronicle because it's one day after the next. that
And
you
it
learn
tells
there.
about the situation where Russia is during the war and where other countries, the advances and the retreats. And the one chapter deals, of course, with this wonderful time we had for about a month in Santa Moor, where the Germans had not devastated the land at all, and where the French had saved everything for our arrival. And I, being the only one who could speak French, was invited out for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and ate gluttonly as a glutton, and ended up properly with a kidney stone.
I want to point out for our viewers who might have tuned in late, just to shake my finger and say, shame on you. You should have seen this program from the very beginning, and I hope you have the opportunity to do so. One of the good reasons for coming here to visit with our good friend, Dr. A.B. Degrandpre, and his son Arthur on Pleasant Street in Plattsburgh is because the doctor has published his diary from the war years. This is the actual diary. This is the published version of it. I might point out that many of the photographs that you've already seen on this program, if you did join us in time to see them, have been republished in the book, and none of them are backwards in the book. Right, Arthur?
Get that right, Greg.
Oh, boy. Are you happy with the finished product here,
I
Doc?
think so, yes. Yeah, I think so.
It takes a while to do it. First of all, I was looking through this diary, and it would be difficult for me to read that with my old eyes here. Look at how crammed some of this writing. You wanted to get every bit on a page, didn't you, huh?
Well, some of it was written during very stressful periods, you know.
And you wrote on both sides of
On
each
both-
page.
That's right, both sides of each page.
But doctors are known for their good handwriting.
Oh, doctors are known for the good handwriting. So who did your daughter have to
My
try to
daughter
transcribe
Joanne
it?
spent hundreds of hours doing this. She's put it all on a computer and handed it into the publisher in written hand, in longhand, and then also in one of these little discs that they submit, you know.
It's amazing. It puts me in mind of our good friend Keith Herklow, who is a city clerk and has become a wonderful historian just because of his ability to make contacts with people and get information and fill in some of these historical blanks that we've had through the years. And he came upon a wonderful journal, and he had to sit down and read that journal that was written in somebody else's script a long, long time ago during the Battle of Plattsburgh era and after, transcribe all of that, and make all the footnotes, and then eventually get it published. And so I think it's important that we mention that in connection with this, because this isn't a huge, fat book. But when you were to take the man hours or woman hours taken just to put it together and transcribe it and get it from this point to that point, that's what you call a labor of love, right?
Herculean effort.
Labor of love. This book is
A daunting task.
a daunting task. This book, called My Diary, by Arthur Patterson Degrandpre, M.D., is just barely being made available for the Christmas season 2001, as we're recording this program on December 14th. You don't even have too many copies of it yet at this point in time.
This is basically the only copy
This
I
is
have
it.
at the moment.
But you've ordered a number.
I ordered a number, and it'll be available in 4 or 5 different sites.
What are some of those sites? Did you?
Well, one is Yarborough.
Yarborough
in
Square
Peru.
out there in Peru. Yeah.
One is Unforgettable Gifts, which is on Route 3.
Oh, that's the former Booth Gifts, right?
Former Gifts
Yeah.
booth. One's the Cabinet Gallery, which is on Hammond Lane. One is in the Corner Bookshop.
Cornerstone Bookshop.
Cornerstone Bookshop,
Yeah.
and one is the General Trading Company.
Yep.
So the books
It's-
are available if
it's-
anybody is interested.
It's a piece of world history.
This book was
It's-
really written by me for my benefit of my children, grandchildren, and
But
great-grandchildren.
as I said before, isn't it wonderful to share?
It is, for
Because
sure.
it's, as I just started to say, it's a part of world history, and it's a part of North Country history and local history. Because, you know, if ever there were an appropriate description of a person who's lived a life like you've lived, it would be icon, because you are an icon. And it's so delightful for Calvin and myself to come into your home, to invite you into your life for just a couple hours every once in a while, so that we can share this information with your friends and neighbors around the North Country. Because you have had a good life. You've had
Wonderful
tough
life.
times and you've had great times, as we all do. And, you know, if we might pontificate for a moment, neither one of us have any idea why we're still around
Exactly.
and exactly what our mission is, but it's nice to look back and say, yeah, it's been pretty darn good.
I've had many, many close calls, of course, in my life, particularly, I guess, the worst at Anzio. But even before the war, I've had other instances where I think my life has been spared by some unknown cause. I call whoever it is my guardian angel. You know?
Yeah, well, your guardian angel is up there watching you, your wonderful family, your 8 children, 4 before the war and 4 after the war, still around you almost daily, and isn't it great?
It is. I'm so happy to be alive still with 7 of my children all in the neighborhood, so that I have a fine dining room for dinner every evening of the year.
You don't have to cook many of your own meals anymore, do
Only
you?
one of the children has moved out of the area. That's John, who lives in northern New Jersey. So thank goodness they're not eight nights in the week.
And he's and he's pretty readily accessible too. You know, it's a good thing to do, I think, for all of us here to reflect, because it is the Christmas season. Christmas season is a good time for reflection about our deep religious beliefs and our belief in what our hopes are in the future for humanity. And we're going through some pretty trying times right now in the world. No one would ever dream that this would happen again in our lifetime. And yes, I can remember the shock of the war when I was a youngster, arts age, back in the early 1940s. I can remember all the other conflicts before and since in my own, what personal effect that had on me, and broadcasting them for all those years on the radio, and now working through the camera's eye in Calvin's hometown cable television camera and remembering again. And it's good to sit down once in a while and take stock, isn't it, Art?
Oh, it certainly is. Actually, we feel, I speak for my brothers and sisters, we're so privileged to have our dad with us and to be able to relate all these wonderful tales that are really history. To have a man who was walking around as a historian, it's a blessing.
I don't want to
I
ask.
must add, let me add a little something. How blessed we are with the 8 children, 20 grandchildren, and 23 great-grandchildren. I was reading the other day an interesting little story about a family doctor who was delivering a baby at home. His only assistant was a 5-year-old child, watching him actually deliver this woman. The baby came out feet first. He pulled the baby out. The baby was a little blue, so he tapped the baby on the back to get breathing started. The little girl's comment, I thought, was interesting because she said, "You know, doctor, that baby shouldn't have been there in the first place, but I'm glad you gave him a good spanking."
Oh, isn't that beautiful? What a great life. Maybe someday Hollywood will get a hold of these things and say, you know, we ought to do this on the big screen. At the very least, we're perpetuating some of the good points, some of the highlights of your life here on Hometown Cable. It's a pleasure for us to do it. I want to, as we're recording this again on the 14th day of December 2001, I want to wish both of you the best holiday season you've ever had. There are so many unknowns, but you know, if we enjoy today, then it's a good thing. So thank you again. For
Season's
inviting us
greetings to
here.
both you and Calvin, thank you both for coming. I enjoyed the little get-together with you both.
And Arthur, thanks for answering that front door with those little singing jingles and things today.
It was a pleasure, Gordy, and I want to wish you and Calvin a Merry Christmas and the very best for 2002.
And I hope you all have your suggestions about where you'd like us to go next. We'd love to come to your living room or dining room or kitchen or basement or attic if you have some interesting things to talk about. We'd love to find out what your story might be. Just give Calvin a call at 298-4663, Hometown Cable, 2 words, on the Ridge Road up there in Champlain, and we'll chat with you someday. Who knows where we're going to be next for our little corner.